There is a devastating couple of lines. Well, there are a devastating couple of lines in there, in the chorus about that. I waited a whole year to see if you found a place in your heart for me. And it's like,
Hmm.
oh, the impact of that idea that you're asking for something quite tenderly. Really, you're asking for him to find a place in his heart, and it hasn't
Yeah.
happened. So that's yeah, that must also hurt as much as it's a maturing. It must hurt.
Well, I think there's actually some real vulnerability in that, isn't there? I
Mm.
think that when you're writing things, for me anyway, a lot of the time I don't really know what I'm writing about until it's done. You just sort of and then look back on it afterwards and go, oh. And a lot of the time the lines that I think are just throwaway nothing lines that I really didn't think about, that I just sort of plucked from the sky. I guess end up being the most inspired lines, the ones that people relate to the most. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I didn't really think that was an especially profound line, but it's the line from the song that most people mention, actually. And yeah, I guess I really felt like I gave a lot in that. I gave a lot in that relationship.
Mm.
And sometimes you're the problem and sometimes you're not the problem. And in that one, unequivocally, I was not, like
Yeah.
I knew that I can think of other relationships where I've been the bad guy, like 100% where I should, send out some apology emails. Like, sometimes you're just not there to be, you're not ready to be the good person in the relationship. Um, but in that instance, I just was like, I was sweet and naive and young and like just doing my absolute best and really committed and he just couldn't meet me. So
Yeah, and if the gentleman did not have a place in his heart for you, he should have respectfully let you go a lot earlier. It would be
well,
my
that's right. I think he thought that he did. And, I guess there's some maturing in that as well, isn't there? Being like, okay, you think this is good, but I think it's not good enough for me. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Now you tried a few different producers before arriving at this version. What didn't work about their versions?
The thing, honestly, was that every version worked, which was why it was really hard. We didn't, there was no one that I was like, this is not it. You are not getting it. The problem was that everyone, I think the natural inclination was to make the song sad, to make the production sad, to match the overall tone of the song. And in terms of what the message of the song is, and also the way I heard it when I wrote it, it was just not what I had in mind. I wrote it, when I first wrote it, I envisioned it almost as like a, county fair in the 1930s, maybe like a barbershop thing almost. Like I had heard it as really like, upbeat and like a bit jaunty. And I just couldn't seem to impress to anyone enough that I didn't want it to be a sad one.
Yeah.
I want it to be hopeful. I want you to want to dance. It's a barn dance song, not a breakup song.
Yeah, because
So
it's like a rite of passage song.
yes, totally, totally. And yeah, people, you want to hope out of that, right? So we have a sad version that I mean, I may unleash upon the world at some point. But no, this was the version that I always heard in my head. And Paul, my partner, and I co-produced it. So we had 100%, like 360 on what we were doing with it, where it was going. And Paul got it right away, thankfully. So between the two of us, it was, yeah, really easy process.
Because you also worked together on My Sister's Blue Suitcase, which was a previous single. So I'm guessing now that this is the way you will record your music as a producer, because as you said, this is the version that it sounded like in your head. And clearly you are able to execute that with him if you do that.
Yeah,
So there's less reason to go to someone else to do it.
totally. Yeah. We this both My Sister's Blue Suitcase, I've always been super hands-on with anyone I've worked with. I had a previous EP before this one, like years and years before this one, that ended up getting shelved, that I never got to do anything with, from the studio that I'd recorded with. And so I've had a really long time working behind the scenes, even if not like with any output, without any output that anyone's been able to see. I've had a really long time figuring out what the process is for me, I guess, behind the scenes. And I've always been super hands-on. I want to be there in the mixing. I'm there when everybody records. I find in country music, It was really surprising to me when I first came into country that a lot of the time you just send the producer your song and the producer works on it without you, and then you just kind of come back in. And I guess that happens a lot of the time, but it was never how I had worked. And so from the get-go, I was like, but I need to be there, you know. And then so over the last two songs, it became really clear that it's more of a cohesive, like a two-way street relationship as far as producing, rather than just a bit of input, you know. And it's good having the two of us as well, because we're both on the same page. So I trust that if I couldn't be at something, which hasn't happened yet, but I trust that if I couldn't be at a session, that Paul would have it covered.
Right.
And there's been a couple of times actually recording the guitar and banjo and mandolin and everything with Michael Moko, where Paul was on tour and couldn't come. And so I just did that session on my own and felt like, okay, yeah, look, I've got it. You know, like, it takes a while to build up the confidence to think that you can go in and do it on your own. But yeah, it's been really gratifying.